everyone. Hello, hello. Well, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to the Sounds of Storytelling panel. My name is Mari, and I'll be moderating today. It's just a bit of a process of how some of the world's best sci-fi and fantasy writers and narrators create the audio experiences we all love so much. So, without further ado, let's meet our panelists. First off, the author of the New York Times bestselling audiobook Starter Villain and this month's Audible original release of Constituent Service, please welcome John Scalzi. The author and narrator of the critically acclaimed Lady Astronaut series, please welcome Mary Robinette Kowal. Best-selling author of the Legend of Driz series. Please welcome R.A. Salvatore. And showrunner of Wynonna Earp and the highly anticipated Audible original Wynonna Earp Tales from Purgatory, which releases today. Please welcome Emily Andras. Audible's #1 best-selling Bobiverse series, the 5th installment of which released last month. Please welcome Dennis E. Taylor. And rounding out our panelists, the beloved narrator who has performed over 500 audiobooks, including Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary, Jack Carr's The Terminal List series, and Dennis E. Taylor's Bobiverse series, of course. Please welcome Ray Porter. In the audience, we'll have a short amount of time for Q&A today, so please be thinking about your questions, but in the meantime, we've got a lot to unpack, so let's dive into it. Emily, I'm going to have you kick us off, since today is all about the process of work. Let's start from the writing phase, and for you, you write for the screen with Wynonna Earp, and now with Tales from Purgatory, it is your first foray into writing for audio. How did that change your approach to writing?
It was terrifying, but in a good way. I'll be honest, like one of the things that forces you to get really creative when you're writing for the screen is you have to be very aware of budget and location and what have you. So to take sort of a beloved TV show and be able to do it in this new medium, we were really able to tell stories in a new environment, on a plane, on an old-timey Western train with a giant, spoiler alert. So just do things that we always wanted to do and talked about in the writing room, but maybe weren't able to with this new soundscape. So it was incredibly freeing and kind of helped us reinvent beloved characters and sort of dive in a way we hadn't been able to before on screens. It was wonderful.
Was the train something like something you've always wanted to do, or?
Well, Wynonna Earp obviously is like the descendant of Wyatt Earp, so there's a very big contingent of Old West kind of lore that comes with it. So just being able to go back in time and kind of look back at her famous ancestors' history was great. We could afford a train whistle. That was the thing. I'm spoiled for whistles when it comes to whistles. Thank you all.
Well, let's talk about some of the authors. John, we can go down the line with the authors with this one as well, but you're an author whose work has been brought over to audio. So what are you considering when you're writing for audio, and how does that differ from writing for the page?
Dialogue tags. No, this is no joke. When I started writing novels, I would have he said, or she said, or he said, or she said at the end of every sentence of dialogue. And when you're reading it, that's perfectly fine because your brain will automatically skip over it, right? It's just directing traffic. But the funny thing about the contracts for audio is that they are required. Every single word has to be in the audio version. So I was listening to Red Shirts, which was done by Will, and he did a wonderful job. but literally every line was he said, she said, he said. I'm like, who is this terrible author? This terrible author who is doing that. And so one of the things that I learned that you have to do for audio is the things that you think are necessary in print are not necessarily the things that are necessary in audio. So I have since literally Red Shirts drastically cut back my audio tags or have changed them up because in audio it makes such a difference to the reading experience. Now the irony is that because I started doing that, I have become a better author, so thank you, Audible, for that. But it is one of those things that you are aware in a way that you're not when you're just writing for the page, that someone is speaking your words, and that awareness that someone is actually is going to come out of their mouth and into someone's ears means that you are much more attentive to things like flow, that the dialogue works, that there is a differentiation between how people speak, because that will help the narrator. And occasionally, you get to mess with the narrator. There's a book that I do that is called the Human Division, where there is a character whose name is because I wanted my narrator to do that.
As someone who both narrates and writes, I can confirm that your narrator hates you.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Because my narrator hates me, and I am my own narrator. But on the writing front, the biggest thing for me is transitions. On the page, you can indicate a transition by just a hashtag, a line break. And in audio, if that transition is not clear, the narrator has to work so hard to make it clear and to help the reader reorient. And that often, it's just, like, I'm narrating someone else's work, I'm like, whoa, I don't know what's happening right now. Or I'm listening to something, I think, this was written for the page. So transitions for me, and then accidental repetitions, where, because we are drawn to repetitive sounds, that's a very useful thing to us. It gives us information, dripping water, predator footfalls. But when they're accidental, they can become distracting. And then the last one that I think about very heavily are homophones, because when I am narrating somebody else's book and I hit a homophone that I cannot fix, here's an example that I had to narrate in somebody else's book and I could not fix it for them. The word copse, C-O-P-S-E, is a grove of trees. She ran from the police into the copse.
I love that. Oh, my turn. Well, I came at it a little differently because by the time I started writing, I mean, when my first books came out, audio, they would have been fighting between 8-track and cassette. So it wasn't that popular back then. But so by the time everything went over to Audible, they had about 20 books of mine that were already done. And for me, I haven't really made that transition in my mind. I remember when we were on the panel a few years ago here, you had mentioned that about he said, she said. That's when I first realized you didn't have to read every word.
Surprise.
But what you're taught in snotty English courses is that the road to hell is paved with adverbs, and good dialogue doesn't need attrition. And the reason is, they should know who's talking by the story. And, well, they should know what if they're saying something sarcastically, of course they are. And so I tried to adhere to that a little bit in my earlier books, but then as I went along, and this is the whole evolution, Audible is just the next step in the evolution of communication for novels, of the novel format, right? What I started realizing probably around the turn of the century was that if I didn't do attribution to dialogue and I had more than 2 people talking, I was losing readers. And if I didn't use adverbs, they weren't getting it. And I'm like, I don't understand this. But then I figured it out, is that back when message boards were huge, before social media dominated, everything has attribution, and emojis are adverbs. And so we kind of de-sophisticated the reader with the internet. And that's not a pejorative, and I'm not putting it down. It's just people taking communication differently. So for me, here I have 20 books with Audible, and I did an Audible exclusive novella a few years ago, and I'm thinking, do I change the way I write this? Do I give Victor Bavine a break and take out the he said, she said? I'm like, but then what about the people who have been in this series since they were in high school or junior high, and they're now in middle age? So I really did not change much. I kind of went a little bit back to the earlier Bob and a little less attribution, but I didn't make that change because so much of my work predated it.
Amazing. Dennis, how about you? What are your considerations when you're writing for audio versus writing for the page?
Well, I'm very lucky because I'm a Johnny-come-lately. When I started writing, Audible was already a thing, and my first book went Audible. So I didn't.
Get closer to the mic also. Thank you.
So I didn't have the conversion issues, and I didn't have the he said, she said issues because I already knew that was a thing. I also had Ray to make sure that my characters were distinct. In the printed version of the books, Guppy has square brackets around everything he says. In the audio version of the books, there's no question that you're listening to Guppy. Thank you. And when I do multiple individuals speaking, I can tag them, with word tags, and Ray will know who's talking, and he just takes care of making sure that the voices are different. So for me, it's a no-brainer.
Shut up.
It takes my name, and then we have to deal with this too.
Yeah, I know. What are you?
The legal problems with the Bob is coming.
Yeah, royalties.
Ray, as a narrator, your job is to convey the author's work through your performance and your voice. What is the initial collaborative process between an author, and especially with Dennis, before stepping into the recording booth?
Well, I think it's going to be very different from author to author, from narrator to narrator. In my case, usually it's just, hey, here's this book. Sometimes, I'll get notes from an author or whatever, but oftentimes you don't actually get the privilege of meeting the author until after the fact. And so it's a little bit like a blind date. You finish the book hoping that the author is pleased with how you brought their work to sound, but you never really know, until you find out. So I've not done a great deal in the way of collaborative stuff. Sometimes there'll be a pronunciation list, which is helpful if in the author's mind, the name of a character looks like Pete, but it actually is. Maybe let me know. So a lot of it is basically when I go into a book, my only information is the book. And so I have really worked very hard to try to figure out what each book's voice is, because every book does have a unique voice. And just try to stay out of the way between the author and you who are listening to it, and just steer a little bit. But that's about it. Now, obviously, there are some things like, Cops, where the steering wheel falls off in your hands, and you do your best. And I have noticed a kind of a fall off in the he said, she said, and adverbs and that kind of thing, because it's a little bit like cowbell. A little bit goes a long way. For me, really, every book is just, okay, what are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to tell me that I can tell the people who are listening to the book? And that's about that. Then I get to meet the authors later, and it's wonderful.
I bet. Going down the line again, John.
Oh,
Yeah, you're up, buddy. Your work has been narrated by various and notable performers, including Will Wheaton and Zachary Pico, most recently Amber Benson for Constituent Service. How do the different narrators, the various styles and voices, how do those contribute towards your work?
Well, I mean, I think it makes a huge difference. So, for example, Will. Will is, we grew up in the same area. We're about the same age. We're super nerds. And he's a friend of mine. So, like, literally, to go back to what was being said earlier, it's like anytime that he has a question, he'll just literally text me, right? Like, dude, do you really want this pronounced this way? I'm like, yes, you have to say it exactly that way. And so he, we have that good relationship. But the other thing is that I kind of knew before the dispatcher was completely done that Zachary Quinto was the voice that they had chosen for it. And so in many ways, I'm of course very used to him from Star Trek and from Heroes, and that had some influence on how I was writing the text because I knew he was going to deliver it. The same with Amber Benson, who had done work with in Lock-In and Head On before, and knowing, and again, she and I are also friends, so knowing that she was the narrator that they had chosen for Constituent Service well before I started writing it, because I'm incredibly lazy and waited until the last minute, meant that I could hear her voice in my head, and it made a material difference in primarily the main character, because I didn't know how she was going to voice all the aliens. And that was sort of comforting. Like, I felt reassured that no matter what I wrote, that a professional like Amber or Zachary or Will, or even Mary Robinette, who has narrated me in the past, was going to do a good job of it. And then the occasional, antagonizing the narrator aside, you want that partnership to work. You want to make it easy for the narrator to sell it to the readers. So having those folks in mind has made a huge difference for me.
I love that you're thinking of your narrators while you're writing too. And this makes me wonder, Mary Robinette, you are a writer and a narrator of your work. The way I imagine you is you're furiously typing on a typewriter and you're narrating all of the voices while you are writing. But what is the actual process like for you? And does the performance ever inform your work or vice versa, or not at all?
So interesting. We talk about the writer Mary Robinette and the narrator Mary Robinette. And the narrator Mary Robinette really does hate the writer Mary Robinette, because with the Lady Astronaut books, it's an international organization, the International Aerospace Coalition. It goes into space. And so I wanted to represent all of those people, and I put in a bunch of languages I don't speak. Big, long sentences. Sure, yeah, I totally know how to speak Croatian. 100% a thing that I can do. No. So I will just write it the way the story needs to be written. And then I will trust that my narrator will figure it out. And I say that because I've had other people narrate my stuff as well, and I've had to narrate other people's stuff as well, and I know that that's the job. The job is to figure it out. And I also have a really good engineer who is willing to let me take as many takes as I need to in order to get it to sound passable. And then he speeds it up a little bit, so I sound fluent. So it did mean that in this latest book, I did have a section where I had originally a whole bunch of not English, and I was like, hang on, you're going to have to narrate this. Does it actually need to be in there? Can we just say, since Elma doesn't speak this language, should we just say, And then they said some things that I didn't understand. So I did.
Well done.
I think the dichotomy that you face between one side and hating the other, I think we all feel that when yourselves.
Yeah.
Bob, the Legend of Grit series, pardon the extremely cringy pun, but it is legendary. It's you've been writing it since the late '80s. There's what, 40 books now? Close to 40 books?
39.
39. That's
Well, if you count the cleric books and the Stone of Tomorrow young adult books and the anthology, yeah, there's a lot.
And specifically the Audible original, like the collected stories, boasts a star-studded cast. Oh my
I was
goodness.
gonna tell that story, yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Sean Astin, Felicia Day, friend of the show, Steve, Weird Al, and so many more. For you, what did the different voices and performances styles bring to the table when presenting your work that already has developed?
Okay, I have to set this up. I was sitting there typing, and my wife comes in and she says, "Hey, look at this." And she hands me this blog that somebody had written, saying, "I wanted to read a book, and it's got this flying horses and talking swords, and what is this?" And a bunch of swears. I won't do it here. And I'm like, "That's my story." And so I called Wizards. I think I called Wizards. I might have called Steve over at Audible. I'm like, "What the hell is this? That's my story." It was Ice-T's blog, by the way. And we wanted to surprise you. We're doing this collection, and that's when I found out. I'm like, what? And they're reading the names, and David Duchovny, and Weird Al, and Ice-T, and I think the experience, like, I was supposed to go to Ice-T's house to do his podcast, but I had an appointment with TSA that I couldn't get out of, and I had spent a year getting. So I found myself walking from Logan Airport to Fenway Park in Boston on the phone with Ice-T, doing his podcast. And the first thing he said to me goes, "Do you really pronounce these names?" And I said, "That's not how he said it. It's more colorful than that." And I said, "Of course not." I love you. We became great friends on Twitter and stuff after that, but it was amazing to me to listen to, like, Felicia Day and do her dwarves. And I think she did Bones and Stones, which was really going for me. But you watch it come to life, and I feel the same way I feel about the artists that do the covers, right? It's like, I don't want to print that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a writer. What talent I have is writing. I'm not doubly talented. And I quickly came to learn with Victor, who does all the Dritz books pretty much, Victor Bavine. I quickly came to learn that the amount of talent that they bring to the table is right there with anything that I'm doing and creating it in the first place. And then just listening to the different voices and seeing people catch it and bringing such different characteristics to the names, to the accents, to whatever. It's like watching 10 different artists paint the cover for your book. And I love that. And you know, I can't draw a stick man, so when Larry Elmore does a cover, Keith Parkinson does a cover, and Todd Lockwood does a cover for me, it's like, I almost feel like if I inspired this person to do this, and I feel the same about the narrators, then I must have done something okay. Because this is really, that's how I felt about that. But that was the biggest shock. I had no idea they were doing that. None. I was glad they got Felicia on board, because I actually know that.
I hope you told TSA the full story, by the way.
What's that?
I hope you told TSA the full story of you walking over.
Oh no, I just wanted to get my card and get out of there.
All right, well, Emily, Why Not Earth, of course, is a passionate audience. Those of you who've grown with the show, and the tales from Purgatory, it includes most of the original cast, which is so exciting for fans. Did the evolution from screen to audio change the way you see your work? And did any of your cast members surprise you in the way that you only heard their voices this time around?
I mean, very much. I mean, I was really intimidated from going from screen to audio, to be honest. I mean, I cannot lie. If you see my cast, they're extremely attractive. And that's a huge crush. Who knows what they're even saying? You're just staring into their eyes. So taking that tool away from them and for me was tricky, but it did force me to kind of dig down in different ways. It was funny. I was most intimidated, I would say, about how to convey the action, because we're very lazy in TV. You can just watch people karate chop each other and you get it. But in audio, you have to figure out a way to like describe the action and in a way that isn't just like pure exposition. So, you know, that did kind of force me to go back to my roots of writing. But what surprised me the most was how much the characters and the cast were able to kind of expand on the emotions of these characters we already loved, to be honest. One of our most beloved cast members, Tim Rozon, actually wrote one of the episodes, which was wonderful. And, you know, we still, thanks to Audible, put the whole cast in the same room when they were recording, and that was such a boon to the emotion and the spirit of it, I think, just that they could still look into each other's eyes and perform almost like a play. I think you can really hear the results, and it was just so rich. But I absolutely loved it. It just allowed me to tell stories again that I would never be able to on the screen and really do so much character work. That was such a blessing after almost 8 years of doing Earth. So it was great.
To see that evolution. Dennis, you know, we've heard from your narrator about the collaborative process and you know, being able to meet after narrating your work, but take us back to the first time you were able to hear your work from Ray. And as the journey has continued, book 5, of course, released last month on Audible, was there ever a moment his performance shifted your writing, or even a plot point at some point?
Sorry.
There's 2 questions in that. Sorry. Take us back to the first moment, and then did it ever change things?
Well, the whole experience was absolutely hallucinatory from the get-go. I mean, I fell into writing. I never really intended to become an author. So I produced this book. I suddenly find myself with an agent. I suddenly find myself with a producer. And I suddenly find myself with a narrator. And the next thing I know, the book is on Audible. And when I listened to it, it was almost like I couldn't recognize the writing as my own. It was like somebody else had done this. And it was a story very similar to a story that I'd written. And it was great. And it's never been any other way for me. That's the thing. Now, there is one point that I think I would like to bring up, and it was a revelatory moment, not for me necessarily, but for my wife. We were driving back from holiday somewhere in BC, and Singularity Trap had just come out. And we were playing it on the, we were playing the book on the stereo. And Wahine started to cry. And it was the first time she'd ever really listened to my books and realized what I was doing. And, what Ray had done with them. And that, yeah, the guy's an author.
Stamp of approval. Amazing. Right, you're equipped with an arsenal of voices. And in the Bobiverse series alone, you showcase so much of your range, so much variety, so many Bobs. How do you keep track of all the voices? Do you have a filing system? What's going on there? And tell us the process of just how difficult it is to execute the performance at your level. Are there any hopefuls for voice acting out there? A few in the audience. Yeah, I'd love to know just what is your process like?
Lots and lots and lots of cold medicine. In a situation like the Bobiverse, you have very, I mean, it's at root the same guy, because it's another edition, if you will, of Bob. And yet, as it gets farther and farther out, there's more divergence, there's more, but it becomes about personality, it becomes about intent. So it isn't necessarily about a different voice, but it's a different attitude, a different outlook, a different way of viewing whatever the circumstance is. And I think that's true of pretty much any character. I mean, you can take any accent you want, and authors love throwing the accents. And you can take all of that stuff, but if you don't have the nuts and bolts intent of whatever the scene is, and if you're not able to actually look at it like that, what does this person want? What, acting 101. How does this person get what they're, it doesn't matter what kind of a voice, what kind of dialect or anything that you put on it. I know a lot of people who are versatile vocally. You also have to have that versatility with your thinking, with intention, and getting next to what the script is. So when you have a really oh God, she's gone.
She'll be back. She doesn't want to cough over your wisdom.
Wow, I really suck. It's it comes down to that. I mean, good writing, and I've been blessed being able to narrate Dennis's stuff. It's all there for me if I just listen to the book. What each character requires, what they're going through, and that sort of thing. And then it's not a problem of remembering, okay, does Howard sound like this? Does Bill sound like this? Whatever. Because the characters themselves, who that individual is so locked in that I'm able to jump to it. And you take care of that for me. So thanks. I'll make your wife cry. You take care of your
As I'm hearing everyone speak, it's you're so humble. You're all so humble.
No.
In that area.
Everyone's looking at you when she said.
I know that. I'm aware.
Yeah, I mean, Emily, you're talking about how much the approach was difficult for you, and it was intimidating, and Dennis calls himself an accidental author. I think that, we're all here in this room because we're celebrating your highs, but what is one failure that you can talk about that we can all learn from as an audience that sticks with you?
Oh, I can feel this one. So in 2000, I was trying to write a novel, and I don't know if you remember 2020. I don't know if you remember 2020, but there was this bug that was going around, and there was an election in the United States that was a little bit kinky, and I just found myself trying to write a dark and gritty political thriller set in space. Wrong year. Wrong year to be doing that. And it finally got to a point where I had to admit defeat, right? Like, I was grinding my gears. I wrote 60,000 words in this novel, which sounds like a lot until you realize it was the first 10,000 words 6 times. And it just wasn't working. And at a certain point, you want to power through, but there's also the sunk fallacy cost, which is, sunk cost fallacy, which is I've dedicated so much time, I need to be able to finish this thing. But finally, I just had to admit that I couldn't do it because it was the wrong year for it. I was miserable. I hated everything about that book. The 6th time I wrote the first 10,000 words. And I finally had to say to my editor, look, I can't do it. And he was understanding. He's like, that's fine, we've already paid you. And we've already done the cover for this, but we'll find something else to do. But he was actually really understanding. He was like, this has happened sometimes. It's off the schedule, we'll figure out what we'll do. And I was so relieved, and then I went to go take a shower because I was covered in flop sweat, admitting to my editor that I had completely blown it. And while I'm sitting in the shower, my brain was like, okay, well, now that you're done panicking about a book that you were never going to finish, Kaiju Preservation Society. And the whole thing just downloaded into my brain. And I held myself off, went back to the computer. I was like, hey, remember that thing where I told you I was going to have a book? If you give me 6 weeks, I'll have a book. And I got it in 5 weeks later. And the moral of that story to me is that sometimes you have to give up. Sometimes you're just grinding your gears and it's not working, and it's okay to let it go. Possibly your brain is working on something else, as in my case, but sometimes it's not working, and you're going to make yourself miserable, and you're going to make everybody else miserable, around you miserable, because you're desperately unhappy. But the value of knowing when to cut your losses is actually really important. So that was a failure that taught me it's okay to stop.
So first of all, I just want you to know that this is not COVID. I'm getting over I know, sorry. I'm getting over a normal chest cold, which unfortunately sometimes also triggers an asthma attack. And I left my inhaler in the hotel room, so that was an exciting time there. So there's my failure. No, mine was also a book that I pulled from publication. We had sold it. It was in the publication pipeline, and a friend of mine gave me the very hard talk of, you should not publish this book, because it was a book I should not have written. It was, I have to say, it is a book that I love, but I was the wrong person to write it. It was set in 1907, two POV characters, really cool magic system. The one POV character was a white Southern man, and the other was a young black woman using magic to pass. And I should not have written that book. And so we pulled it from publication, and I wrote a replacement book, which was The Calculating Stars. And with that one, because I needed to write it fast, I put more of myself into that book than I had put with any of the others. And what that taught me was, and I actually wound up using a lot of the research stuff that I'd done from the other one in that, but what it taught me was that the more specific I am, the more I use my own experiences, the more universal the book is. And that was, I didn't have to borrow somebody else's identity to be interesting.
Mary Robinette, how many awards did that win?
Well, John, the Calculating Stars won the Hugo, the Locus, the Nebula Award, and is one of only 18 books to win all 3 awards.
Wow, you're cool.
Oh, it's you. Well, the easiest thing for me to do would say I killed a Wookiee. No, I think for me, I'm also an accidental writer. I was a math major in college. Well, I fell in love with fantasy because it's open. And so I started reading all the fantasy books this was way before the internet. I started reading all the fantasy books I could find, which meant about 3. There was Terry Brooks, Stephen Donaldson, Michael Moorcock, I think, had a book out then, and Ian McCaffrey, and Tolkien. And so when I ran out of things to read, I just wrote a book. And I wasn't trying to get published. I wrote it. I would go to work. I'd get home at 2 in the morning, and I just put the candles on, put on Fleetwood Mac's Tusk, and get a spiral notebook and just write. I couldn't even type. They didn't teach us to type in high school. And I had to hire but then people started reading it and said, well, I really like this, my friends. They looked at my friends. That's why they were my friends. They liked it. I really like this. And so I hired an assistant to type it, and I went and got the writer's mark, and I sent it all around. And I got some of the worst rejection letters you can imagine. I mean, one of them said, Dear Leonard. And I was like, whoa. Of course, I took care of my ego by saying he mixed it up, and some jackass named Leonard is going to get published because he thinks it's my book. And then another one came in, and I'm like, boy, this editor can use a lot of cliches, really bad cliches with words like leaden. And And I think I learned a lot from that because I didn't realize I wanted to be a writer until then, and then I just got mad. I'm really not nice when I'm mad, but I'm going to be damn determined to prove you wrong. So that's what, I was poor. We had little kids coming along, and I was working. I wrote that book. I was a bouncer in a nightclub. I mean, that was my job, and I was working at a plastics factory. I'm from the plastics pioneer city of Leominster, Massachusetts. And we're not proud of that. We killed your oceans, I'm sorry. But I just found the time. I was mad. And that anger, I kind of channeled it and just kept going. I was going to prove those editors wrong. But, yeah, that was brutal. That was brutal.
Did you ever meet any of those editors socially?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. I actually wound up working with one. And I reminded him of that. He didn't remember it. This was many years later. And actually, I couldn't stand the bastard. One of the few editors I've ever had that I really couldn't stand. But they were right. That's the thing. I have to admit, they were right.
Yeah.
That version of that book was terrible. I mean, good to my friends. But, I mean, they were right. And the editors, I hate to admit, I can't say it because they might hear this. Sometimes they're right. Narrators, on the other hand, they're always
I think vengeance is a great motivator, so I like that story. I mean, I come from it a little differently. There's writing I do for myself, and then there's writing for television and film, and it is a job where I have to beg someone else permission to do that kind of writing. Like, I am very lucky to be a working writer in the industry, but I have pitched 8 TV shows this year that did not get picked up. But that is my girlfriend. Failure is my boyfriend. It's fine. We're good. We're going steady. I love it. Any day now. It's going to be a ring on it. It'll be fine. So, I think there's something really funny when you're writing, which is you have to fall in love with what you're doing, but you can't really commit all the way until you're sure, which is a hard dance for people, especially particularly, like I said, in TV. But just to speak to the current state, ERP has been resurrected more times than, I was going to say JC, but I'll say John Travolta. Like, honestly, our lead got pregnant in second year. We had to rewrite the entire second season of ERP with a pregnant superhero. It was probably the best season we ever did. We got renewed for 2 seasons, and then our comic book company, our studio, went bankrupt, and we took a year off. We couldn't make the show. It had never happened before. We had this thing called COVID that these guys made up. I think I've heard of it. We went down for a long time. And then we've been off the air for 3 years, and then this year ERP had a movie and this Audible series, so you can't kill it with fire. It was amazing. I mean, I don't know what it is not to be the underdog. Also, I am also Canadian, so that's familiar. We live in the shadow of the juggernaut. But I will just say, with something like ERP and with the writing, it was really one of the first projects I ever did that was so gratifying, and genre and fantasy and sci-fi lives in this world where people just love it. They love the weird that comes out of your head. Just having such a passionate fandom that understood what I was trying to say and what type of characters I was trying to deliver always made made me feel like the fight was worth it and I wasn't alone. And once you've reached that point as an author, failure is nothing. It's an appetizer. It's just so gratifying to know that people love your work or it's award-winning. That really matters, and that's why you should all keep going if you want to write. So just to find one person who gets what you're trying to say is amazing.
First, I would like to say that Dan McCaffrey is a science fiction author.
Dragons.
Okay, let's do it. I will fight you.
Children, you don't have to do this now. Save it for the pay-per-view.
My, I guess, most memorable failure isn't really a failure so much as dodging a bullet. through my agent, I got a proposal to do a write-up of a background for a video game. And it was very interesting sounding. I have to say that the video game concept was great. I had some misgivings, but we went into it and started negotiating, and we were never able to come to an agreement on it. But at the end, when the thing fell apart, all I felt was relief. And that told me right there that it wouldn't have been a good thing. I'm a science fiction author. That's what I do. I am not a game background writer, and I should probably avoid doing that. And I have nothing but admiration for people who are like series writers who can come up with episode after episode, week after week, to order. Seemingly, this week do this, next week do that. It's amazing. I can't work that.
Before we get to Ray, we'll have Q&A, so if you'd like to ask something, please be lined up, and then get to it.
Failure. Stephen Wright once said, the comedian said, I'm a cesarean baby. You can't really tell except that when I go out the house, I go out through the window. And I am a cesarean baby. So early on, I adopted the philosophy that I'm probably, wow, nice. I'll filter. I don't know how to use a microphone. That I will get there, but I will get there by another way. And for anybody who is aspiring to whatever you're aspiring, you're going to be told no a lot. I mean, being an actor is really fun until it isn't. And it isn't quite a lot because someone has to let you act. So, there's a whole lot of like, follow your dreams, stick to it, and that's really easy to say when things are good, and it's not great when things aren't. Recognizing that if you have set yourself this goal, you're going to get there, perhaps not by the way you think, is the most important thing. I mean, a case in point, years ago, my friend Zack Snyder found out that I narrate audiobooks, and he likes to hear scripts rather than sit down and read them. So I would go in whenever there were rewrites and that sort of thing, and I would read them. And there was one day in the hallway in the offices at Warner Brothers in London when he held up this CGI drawing of this character and said, what do you think this guy would sound like? And I went, I had just looked at the picture, and I'm like, I don't know, something like this. He's like, oh, cool. I'm like, yeah, cool, see you later. And a couple of weeks later, someone else came over and said, oh, by the way, you're Darkseid in Justice League. Which was really, really cool. Until it wasn't. Because, as we all know, things changed with that film. And so I was in the movie, and then I wasn't. Which sucked. Until the project, as it should have been, was saved and resurrected by the kind of people who attend Comic-Cons. I will always be eternally grateful for that. So failure is a little like Tabasco. It should only spice whatever it is you are feeding on at the time. And regard it like that, and you'll be fine, and you'll get there another way. Leave the house, go out through the window. Don't do that if you live in a high-rise.
And I feel like with your different paths, can you tell us just a little bit about Dinner with Mom and like where you're going with your writing?
Well, so Weird Tales Magazine 370 is about to come out. My friend Jonathan Mayberry, who I've narrated a lot of his work, has dragged me kicking and screaming into writing. This will be my third published short story. It'll be in Weird Tales this next week. I got to narrate myself, which I know you are no stranger to. Boy, is that weird. And I am exploring writing, which is fun. So, yeah.
Let's take your first question.
Hi there. Thank you for doing this. This is for whoever would like to answer. My question is, how do you prefer to consume your books and why?
Yes.
No, I will second that.
I always have a print book and an audiobook going, and it depends on the narrator. I listen to all of John's in audio because at this point because I love Will Wheaton. And the other narrators too. I love them too. But I love both. There is no supremacy there.
Yeah, same with me. I think it depends a lot on the book too. You know, if I'm reading nonfiction, I'd rather read it. If I'm reading someone's memoir, I'd rather read it, usually. But, you know, there's nothing like a good sword fight when you're driving down the highway. So, both.
I hire someone.
I would have said reading almost exclusively until a few years ago. And I finally listened to a whole one of a book I'd written for Star Wars, and the names, the way he was saying Nomador, and I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. Tuned in.
I hire someone to interpret all my books into dance. It's really the only way to do it.
Thank you.
My question is for Emily. First, thank you. Second, what is the future for Winona? You have 4 seasons, Tubi, Audible, more of everything, please.
Let's just.
Interpretive dance?
Yeah. I know a guy who knows a guy. I mean, Audible will be mad if we say let's do more, but let's do more. I would love to do more Audible stories, and honestly, it was fun to go back to ERP after 3 years not doing ERP, but it's just like a virus now. I feel like we have so many more stories to tell in every medium. Yeah, more. Yeah, watch out. More. How about just more? Let's just do more. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So there are certain words that are a lot more common in print than they are in conversation, and sci-fi and fantasy genres are notorious for either making up words, or using very obscure terminology. And so, both as a narrator's perspective and an author's perspective, what are your favorite moments of how the bleep do I pronounce this, or that's not how that's pronounced?
I got one for this. Remember many years ago when the word kofifi came out? I put it in the Dark Elf books in the Drow language for the affliction of mirrors. Narcissism, right? And it was just a joke then. And we weren't like all trying to kill each other back then. You should see the hate mail I got for that. I didn't think anyone was even going to notice it. Because it was in the middle of a drow sentence. You would not want to narrate that, by the way. And they just stuck Kofifi in there. I figured I'd get away with it. No, it would be an inside joke. Oh no. And I mean, it's like, it wasn't my editor, but my editor never caught it. But somebody said, I just love that you did this. And I'm like, you caught that? And then the hate mail started because it went out on the internet that I was, using Kofifi. Like, at least now you know what it means.
So I think that every book I narrate, there's a new word that I like. Oh, apparently I've pronounced that wrong my entire life. No one has told me. The one that I'm mad about, though, that and I say this with so much love to Audible, who employs me. You have to pronounce words correctly. Whatever. D-O-U-R.
Dour.
Doer.
No.
So, she was really doer, so he offered her some doers.
Yes. You have to do it that way, don't you?
Not
Got
gonna
a little sword.
So with,
More than one director, maybe that.
you were right. You were right. You were always right. So I have a series called the Interdependency series, and there is a gender-neutral version of the word emperor, which is emperor. And Will, as the narrator, pronounces it correctly. But out in the real world, it's 50-50 whether people pronounce it emperor, they're the ones who have listened to the audiobook, or whether they pronounce it emperox. Because it's yes, leave now and never come back. And here's the thing is that it is so widespread where people are like, is it emperor or emperox? That at this point I'm just like, you know what, they're both correct. They're regional pronunciations. If you pronounce it emperox, you're from the north.
I gotta jump in here real quick. When I was first writing, when I first got asked to audition to do the second Forgotten Realms book, this is 1987. And
I was in high school.
I was only 8. So they sent me, the only thing they sent me from the Realms was Doug Niles' books. That was the only thing they had printed. And there was no internet, right? And so I thought they just wanted to do it where I was following on Doug's books, but I didn't really want to, so I came up with my own characters, whatever. And then the editor called me and said, no, you can't do that. Doug's gonna write more books there. But the maps just had these two little islands. And she says, we're gonna let Doug handle the Moonshine Islands. I'm like, you want me in the water? What? And then they showed me with the Realms, so we had to reset the book, and I had to come up with it. And then I'm at work, I was working in finance, I was doing my month-end close in finance at a high-tech company. The phone rings, it's my editor, and she says, we got a problem, and you can't use so-and-so, one of Doug's characters that I was using to introduce my character. And my hero of the book. And I said, well, I'm good, I don't want to use him, I want to make my own characters. I already told you this. She goes, yeah, but I'm going into a sales meeting. And I need a character, I need a sidekick for Wolfgang. And I said, all right, I'll get back to you next week. She goes, no, I got to go in the meeting, and I need a sidekick. And I said, all right, look, I'll take lunch in about an hour, I won't do my lunch, I'll come up with a character, I'll tell you something. And she doesn't understand. I'm across the room, I'm late for a meeting, selling this to salesperson is really important. And at the top of my head, I said, a dark elf. And there was this long pause. She goes, a drow. And I said, yeah, a drow. And then now the wheels are spinning. I had no idea this was going to happen. And on and on and on. She goes, all right, finally, after this long argument, she goes, well, since it's just a sidekick, we'll let you get away with that. What's his name? And off the top of my head, this is true. I said, Dritz the Warden of Darren the Shesbanon, the Ninth House of Nezabern's She said, what? I said, I have no idea. Can you spell that? And I said, no. That's a true story. There's magic in the world.
Let's get to one last question.
All right. So, gentlemen, I listened to every single book that you have put on all three. Ladies, you're now on my wish list. All right. Bob, please do Driz forever. We appreciate it, and we want more. No notes. All right. Dennis, love Outland and especially the Bobaverse. Any news on the whole option with Chris Miller and Phil Lord? Is anything happening with that?
I cannot officially comment at this time.
Okay, all right, that's fair. That's fair. Also, second question on Outland. Was wondering if you were ever considering making that into a video game. It would be an amazing survival video game.
It would. It would also make a great series on TV.
It would. It would. Yeah. Complete everything to that
An
one.
actor who's available.
Have you considered interpretive dance?
John, I was also wondering, in the past you had talked about a while ago about the Old Man's War and something happening with that. we ever gonna see anything happening with that with TV or movies?
Let me short circuit any question you have with anyone else about any of this sort of stuff. The time to get excited about it is literally the moment you see it on the screen.
Yeah.
And at any point before then, including when it's done and in the can, it can be taken away from you. So as far as it goes, until you see it on the screen, the answer is, I will say this. I love the money that they keep sending me for the options. My daughter went to college on the Old Man's War options. So thank you very much. And also, because you were saying, hey, what do you have available? Come see me. Okay. Thank you.
Have a great Comic-Con, everyone.
Thank you.